So, Tom, we're going to watch our first Doctor Who together. Now, which one would you like to watch? Would you like to watch this one with Tom Baker? Or would you like to watch this one with John Pertwee? Oh, God, this is going to get a lot harder than I thought. I need some help. Hi, this is Mark, and welcome to episode 29 of Nerdology, sponsored by CSO The Cult Fanzine. And my guests today are, in no particular order, Deb Stanish, Ben Schneider, and Lee Rawlings. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Hello. Hi.
How's it going?
Well, all three?
Deb first. Go on, Deb.
Quite well. I'm sitting here with a cup of coffee. You know, it's a beautiful sunny morning. I'm not used to recording this early in the morning because I'm sorry,
we dragged you out of bed.
No, I'm up. I'm a parent. Of course, I've been up since 5:45 actually. No, but because of our the geographical locations of all of our contributors, we do tend to make things later in the evening. So it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
I feel very refreshed. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, though.
I'm sure that'll make a huge difference to our podcast. So the reason we got together is Ben was the person who came up with the idea for this episode. And the idea is that
Guilty.
Ben is going to become a dad later this year.
I am.
Congratulations,
Hey.
Ben.
I am.
Congratulations.
Oh, wow.
And you have certain, well, not reservations, but you're obviously worried about how best to bring up your child and how to make sure that they appreciate nerdy things, but without possibly becoming some kind of Ian Levine type.
I'm sure
where to
Ian
go?
Levine's mother loved him very much. No, well,
Yes.
okay, Mark, we had been emailing, and you had been sending me photos of your lovely child, Tom. And I had been telling you how my wife and I had been trying to have a kid now for a couple of years, and I guess those baby photos that you sent us just sort of unplugged something, and then the miracle happened. Suddenly, I'm going to be a dad in October. And it really got me thinking, because I was looking at my potential child, the baby, what the kid might actually grow up to be. And based on me and my wife, I kind of came to the realization, let's face it, the kid's probably going to grow up to be a geek. Because, for example, I own exactly 12 Dalek action figures, and I own exactly 0 basketballs. So, you know what I mean? But then I kind of had this thought. I want to raise a better geek. If he or she is going to be a nerd, I would like to give them the best nerd quality. I want the kind of geek that in 30 years will be working at NASA or at some Hollywood special effects house, and not be the kind of geek who will be living in my basement. So, how do you raise a better geek, basically?
That's a really good question, isn't it?
Now, obviously, my little boy's, as we record now, he's approaching 5 months old, so I'm not really much of an expert. So I figured, why not get in 2 people who've been through this and maybe have a little bit of advice to impart. I mean, one thing I would say before we get going, just parenting in general, is that everyone will give you advice, and all that advice will almost certainly conflict with each other. And I think a lot of it is going with your gut feeling as a parent and doing what you think is right.
Yeah, but the person giving the advice is always right, Mark.
Of course. So Deb and Lee, you've both got children of varying ages, so you've possibly been through some of the things that Ben is worrying about.
Indeed, go for it, Debs.
Absolutely. Well, I have 4 children, as I have said repeatedly on Verity. My youngest is 9. I have a 13, she's a girl. I have a 13-year-old daughter. I have a 16-year-old son and an 18-year-old son who's getting ready to go off to college this year. And you're absolutely right. You're going to get so much advice. It's amazing. And you will never be judged so hard in your life as you are judged by other parents. Everything you do. Oh, no. Every single thing you do from here on out. It's probably not as difficult for men, but definitely for women. every choice that you make will be scrutinized and held up and examined as a parent, especially as a mother. Do you work? Do you not work? What kind of childcare? What kind of food that you're feeding your child? What you're dressing your child in? And you really just have to sort of let all of that go. And like Mark said, really trust your inner voice, because when it comes right down to it, I think you know what's best for your own individual child. And I think that even goes so far as how you choose to introduce them to the geek and nerd culture, because there's all sorts of different levels of geekiness and sort of nerdology, to bring the name of the podcast right in here. And you find that out really early, because every single child, it doesn't matter if they're siblings, cousins, they and as much as you think that they're going to be mini yous, they all have their very own and distinct personality. So a child
I can change that, right? I mean, I can. I just need to work a little bit harder and mold, right? I mean,
Lee, you can join me in this laughter here.
Oh, I'm laughing hard. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, but you may have one child who's quite ready to watch Doctor Who at the age of 4, and another child who is nowhere near ready to watch, sort of the emotional intensity that goes along with these shows. And that's only something that a parent can gauge. I mean, I think you probably would agree with me in that, Lee.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the interesting thing is, and it's a bit stereotypical, and hopefully I think it's probably changed now, especially in this day and age, is that Holly and Finn, Finn is very much into Doctor Who, very much into the Marvel superheroes and things like that. Holly couldn't care less, and I have tried to bring her up as a geek, tried to bring her up as a nerd, tried to slowly kind of give her some kind of inkling that the science fiction world and the fantasy world is actually really quite good for creative anythings, because she's a singer as well and a writer of songs, so it's good to kind of read lots of books and do this. She doesn't read any books. I'm a librarian. I'm ashamed. She doesn't sit down and watch Doctor Who. She thinks it's all a load of old rubbish, but I keep bringing it back to Christopher Eccleston and Rose, where she absolutely adored that first season, and she really loved Rose. Very strong, powerful character for her to follow, and that it was an interesting thing. But you're right, she has changed. She's come away from that, and Finn is definitely more the geek. But it's interesting. If I'd have only had one child, I'd been thinking, oh my God, I'm on my own still. I'm still watching Doctor Who on my own, alone in the middle of the night.
Here's a weird question. You said that she's not embracing the two of the biggest loves in your life, i.e. reading and Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Is this a form of teenage rebellion? Question mark?
I genuinely think she has no interest at all.
Okay.
I mean, I think the thing is, interestingly, she was, let's just throw music into the mix. She was very much into her pop music, the X Factor and all that kind of stuff. But whatever I did, I couldn't steer her away. That was the zeitgeist. Every girl was into that in Britain. So virtually, every Saturday night I had to sit and watch the X Factor. It was terminally dull and painful, but I had to do it.
I go back to my childhood, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm never going to be like my parents. I'm never going to say, that's a load of rubbish. But
you do.
I just have that feeling it's going to happen.
You really, really do. But it is. But, we all see it for what it is. A big machine that makes money. And, for Holly, to her, it's glitter. It's fantasy. It's her escape. And she writes music and songs, so she can apply that.
Very well.
Yeah.
Wait. Glitter, escape. That's exactly what my dad said about Star Wars and Doctor Who when I was a kid.
And I think as a parent, you have to understand that, that's a fandom in and of itself. It's not a fandom that you enjoy, and it's not a fandom that you like. But she has her own her own circle. She has found her own tribe, and as a parent, you have to learn to respect that and not
you have to encourage that as well.
Yeah, and you sort of can't scoff it off, as sometimes the things that we enjoyed as children were scoffed off by other people, and try to be as understanding. I have the opposite. Well, maybe a little bit of a similar story in that my two older boys were voracious readers. I mean, the apple did not fall far from the tree there. And my daughter, who is now 13, had to do little book reports when she was in first and second grade, and every single book report ended with, "It was all right, but reading's not for me." I mean, every single book report that she did, and it broke my heart. I could not interest this girl in reading, and I was thinking of all the wonderful, women's children literature that I could have introduced her to, and it wasn't until she found something that interested her, which turned out to be the Harry Potter novels, and then the of Divergent and the Hunger Games and those sort of dystopian teen things that are so hot right now, that she became a voracious reader. So it wasn't, I couldn't apply the things that I loved onto her so we could have the shared experience. I had to wait for her to discover what she was interested in and then share in her experience.
I think it's become a bit of a cliche over here in the UK. Kids that sort of grew up at the same sort of time as me and Lee, I think a lot of boys got really into reading through the Doctor Who Target books.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas they may not necessarily have been that interested in reading. I think you're right. You've got these different variations of styles of story, and there's something for everyone. But it's finding that niche that the child really likes. You can't impose your likes on someone else.
No, you can kind of, by osmosis, just get them in touch with it. You know, you can play things in the background. I mean, I will touch on music one more last time, and then I'll move on a bit. But for instance, Holly loves the pop stuff. She loved One Direction and all that stuff. But when she was playing her acoustic guitar, she was realising after a while how easy those songs were. She could fall down the stairs with her guitar and write the next One Direction song. They're that easy. But
maybe you should push her in that direction, get a little college money.
Feeling like I should sometimes, I tell you. But by osmosis, I've been playing lots of other stuff. I mean, acoustic-based kind of alternative country, bit of rock, bit of anything, bit of synth pop, anything, just in the background that had a really strong melody. And she has been picking up, and her style has changed, and she's starting to appreciate what I listen to and why I've listened to it. Instead of looking at me as an old man going, "Oh, stop playing that rubbish," she understands why these particular bits of music are so important. And that's a good way of doing it, is by doing it very slowly, and like you say, Debs, being very patient and waiting for them to turn around and go, "Oh, actually, yeah, reading is good, isn't it?" Or, "Oh yeah, that song is great." So patience is a virtue, especially with girls, I think, and geeks.
I'll write that down. Thank you.
Definitely patience, and definitely exposure to a wide variety of things, because as geeks, we tend to be narrowly focused on those things that we love and we love passionately. And coming to the conclusion that your children are not mini yous can be a little jarring at times. But then once you sort of expose them to a lot of different things, including the things that you love, and you're hoping that something is going to catch their attention, and even if it's something that you are not remotely interested in. Amusingly, my boys were not really interested in playing sports. They all sort of gave it a go with softball or t-ball, and then baseball and basketball and everything. But they never stuck with it and never really interested in. My two girls are voracious. I mean, they belong to every team they could possibly belong to. They really enjoy getting out there and doing that. And it's not something as that I did as a child. I could have not cared less about running a base or kicking a ball, but it's something that they enjoy. So, we encourage that because they like it. We're certainly not pushing them in any direction, but it's a level of exposure that I probably would not have thought that I would be sitting at softball fields, 3 nights a week at this point in my life. But, it's what you do as a parent, and let them find their own path a little bit. And that's
an interesting thing. If we could throw that over to Ben and Mark to say, obviously that you want to bring your kids up loving Doctor Who and science fiction, but what happens if they do go off in the direction that they want to play basketball or they want to go and play soccer instead? And it's like, sci-fi's okay, but I'm really into sport.
Well, I'm going to cry myself to sleep every night, Lee. Of course. Come on.
Well, my wife Amy likes to remind me of how I've told her that, because I'm a football fan. I don't know how many geeks are football fans. I don't know. It sounds a bit weird, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. I've got an
it's
explanation
like you can't
for
like
that.
Both.
You're like an ambassador from two different cultures, aren't you? You're kind of bridging the...
But, it's funny because here in the States, we don't call it the football, it's the soccer. That tends to be a geekier sport than any of the other sports, which are much more machismo. So here in the States, if you're a soccer fan, that ties really nice into comic book culture and everything else, where I don't think it's that way in the UK or in Europe.
No, it isn't.
Well, my dad likes Liverpool. And at quite a young age, I decided that I wanted to support Everton, who are their city rivals. And she's made it quite clear that it could very possibly happen again, which would be heartbreaking for me.
What they?
She's suggesting he might end up being a Liverpool fan.
I'll make sure of it, Mark.
No.
Well, he's rebelling against Dad. That's what kids do, apparently.
Yeah.
So, well, hey,
Absolutely.
getting back to what Deb and Lee was saying about letting your kid find his own way, all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my wife was telling me how whenever she was growing up, whenever she was a kid, she gravitated towards fantasy books and some science fiction-y TV shows, but she never was told that it was geeky or nerdy to like those things. And it was later on when she got into junior high or so that she started hearing the terms geek and nerd having this negative kind of vibe to it. And I wonder if part of it is if a kid is grown up not knowing that, hey, I probably shouldn't get into this because it's not really cool. You know, I'm sure that helps. I mean,
even within sort of nerdy fan culture, you've got particularly, our shared experience is Doctor Who. You've got that kind of perceived fan wisdom where some fans will tell you, no, you shouldn't like that, you should like this. So it's even goes down to that sort of macro level within the fandom. But again, I suppose it goes back to letting them find their own way. But I think you probably stand more chance of getting them interested if you adopt Lee's approach of sort of the osmosis of trying to sort of gently guide them rather than saying, you'll like this.
Yeah, I mean, making it kind of cool is something that Doctor Who's done very well, and I'm really proud of the series for making geek chic, basically. You know, it has. It's made a lot of people kind of stand up and go, oh, I don't mind being... Do you know what? In the early days, in the 1980s, here in the UK, I don't know whether you got Doctor Who magazine in the early 80s or it came later, but we would be walking around, I think Mark probably agree, with Doctor Who magazine tucked firmly into a bag or in a paper bag. You would not be reading it on the bus because it's simply...
You'd hide it inside your copy of the Radio Times. You wouldn't be blatantly showing it on.
Exactly, and we had greasy hair and we were slightly overweight. We had glasses. That's how nerds and
Speak for yourself, Lee.
Geeks were looked at through other people's eyes, basically. But no, we've moved a long way since then, and we've been to lots of conventions. You know, we've seen how the younger generation have embraced things like manga and anime, and all the things that is very fat popular culture now. You know, the great things like the Big Bang Theory, they've kind of all made it very acceptable to be a geek. We still get, you know, people still get picked on for being like that. But I keep reminding my son that if he ever gets bullied or told that he's a geeky weirdo, you just turn around and say, well, a geek made your phone, mate. A geek made that game you've been playing, Angry Birds. You know, these geeks, these so-called people that get laughed at and prodded, they are ruling the world. The geeks have inherited the earth, my friend. So, you know, you just have to kind of turn around and say, you know, that's what your every piece of technology you have in your hand is from some kind of geek mentality. So, you know, stand back and just be careful what you're saying.
And I think we've definitely
don't kick a football in my face.
Yeah, we've definitely entered into an era, at least in my observations, where you know, all those people that were picked on 20 years ago are now controlling the websites and they're controlling the media and they're controlling the technology, and all of a sudden, you know, they're at the top of the heap. They're at the top of the food chain, and it is no longer. It's no longer as derogatory, at least here in the States, and particularly in the more urban area. I'm outside of Philadelphia, which is sort of big city. Comic book culture is really cool. San Diego Comic-Con is an event that is covered in mainstream media. It's, you know, we still get the, oh, look at these people dressing up, but that's really sort of lessening, and it's become, people are recognizing the creativity and the intelligence that sort of surrounds the geek community, and it's... It's no longer, I don't think it's no longer really the thing that people are shamed over as much.
I think also it's far more accessible for kids these days. I mean, when we were growing up in the sort of late 70s, 80s, certainly me and Lee, you guys are obviously far younger than us. You know, you were restricted. You didn't have VHS even when we were quite young, so you were sort of restricted to books and you know, live TV. Whereas now, you know, everything's at your fingertips.
Right. You
can really investigate lots of different things and find your kind of niche that way.
And this is what it'd be interesting to see what happens with your kids, Mark and Ben, because, you know, eventually, obviously everything is on the internet now. We wouldn't have believed it, that how much we have at our fingertips. And now we're at that kind of place with the teenagers where they expect everything at their fingertips, everything. And we don't know where that's going to go next, but popular culture and sci-fi and Doctor Who and all this sort of thing has suddenly blossomed and spread and become so much more acceptable. And you go onto Facebook pages and you see hundreds of thousands of people liking a Doctor Who page, whereas in the 70s we just assumed it was me and the cat watching Doctor Who, and possibly matey down the road who I'd talk to behind a tree so we didn't get beaten up by the bullies. That's pretty much what it was like. But now, it's kind of like some great connection with the rest of the world, which actually makes it okay to be into what you're into. And I think that's great freedom.
But as a parent, too, it is a little concerning just how accessible everything is on the internet.
Good and bad.
And that's something that, it's only a decision that individual parents can make for their child. I have only had positive encounters through my life on the internet since I started. So I am definitely not an advocate of strangling that. And putting a lot of parental controls on. But, you do have to have conversations with your children. Where are they going? How are they engaging online? My 13-year-old daughter, who has since become, Fangirl Junior in my house, huge Doctor Who fan, has a billion followers on Instagram because she doesn't post personal photos, but she's always regramming, they call it, fan photos and, cute little gifts that have been made. We have to have conversations all the time about how you conduct yourself. What personality are you putting out there? How traceable are you? Because, we live in a culture where the college that you're going to and the employers that you're going to have at some point are going to, they're going to Google you and they're going to find out what you have done. So how you conduct yourself in online forums, how you react when people are not nice to you, because that certainly happens, especially to women on the internet. It's all it opens up a whole new avenue of parenting that I didn't anticipate having to deal with when I had children. But it's one I think I feel particularly equipped to have because of my own experiences. And I think that is a benefit that a lot of parents who may have geek children who are not in the geek culture have no way to prepare themselves for.
I myself am a manager, and one day, I haven't done it yet, I will be employing people and having to interview them. I don't think it's legal actually to go and kind of ride through people's past, but actually it could make a difference, I suppose, in the future. Maybe it does already, I don't know. But anyway, it just would be interesting to see if I had two candidates, one who had a bunch of tattoos and liked football, and then on the other side there was a guy wearing a wizard's hat. I mean, I'd probably employ him.
Thanks, Lee.
That's all right. Just so you know, in the future, if you want to apply for a job, you've got it, Mark.
That's right. Post a picture of yourself.
I'm the guy with the tattoos and the football shirt.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, I had some questions, particularly like things that I didn't have to worry about whenever I was a kid, which I guess I'm going to have to start thinking about. Like, I've been asking this lately, and no one seems to really know, and it's the cell phone question. How early do you let a kid have a cell phone?
That's a good question.
That's something I never had to worry about, or my parents never had to worry about.
Well, it's a shame they haven't got cell phones that are designed for kids, that have, I suppose you can kind of lock things out and all that, but with kids and, say, sneakers, trainers, they will go out and they'll buy the best one. If they're addicted to Adidas or whatever, Adidas, they'll go out and buy it because that's the in thing. They've got to get the newest one all the time. It's like an obsession. It drains your mum and dad's wallet. With a cell phone, it is that, but obviously everybody needs one now. So I don't know. It's interesting. By the time your kids are old enough, maybe there'll be some kind of child version of a mobile that they will hang around with, or maybe there won't be. It is a hard one, that's difficult. 13, we said. 13.
Yeah,
really?
our
Okay.
rule was, not really a rule, but it was sort of as the need presented itself. So with my boys who were not involved in sports and we weren't dropping them off places, when they went to high school, they got a phone, which was 13 and a half going on 14.
Yeah.
but my daughter, who is just turned 13, got a cell phone last year because she was involved in lots of extracurricular activities, and we were dropping her off places for sports practices. And, with 4 children, you can't always sit with each child at each event. So you sort of, let the coach know that you'll be back to pick them up because you had to then take another child someplace else. So we felt that need a little bit younger, but there's a ton of peer pressure involved too. My daughter's in third grade. She's 9. Many of her classmates not only have phones, but they have smartphones, which I think is ridiculous. At that age, they need a phone that they can call to have somebody pick them up, or in case of emergency. They do not need to have internet access 24/7 because that is so prevalent elsewhere that they don't need to have it in their pocket.
But Mark and I are just starting off, and in 9 years, the world may have changed to the point where our kids that are in nursery school have to have cell phones. Maybe I don't know.
You're absolutely right. I mean, my daughter's when my daughter enters high school, the high school that she is contemplating, she has not yet decided. We have not yet decided where she's going in high school. The one school that we are seriously considering, one of their requirements is you have an iPad. You have to have an iPad.
Really?
That is part of your school supply list, because so much of what they do is done through some smart boards, and the iPads are linked right into the smart boards. So presentations and projects that they're doing are just sent right from their iPads through a Bluetooth. So, and this is not something that my boys had to deal with in their high school experience. So who knows? By the time your children start school, they may have a chip implanted. Who knows?
I used a shovel and a piece of chalk, and it was fine for me. What the hell? An iPad, really?
Yeah.
Like they don't even give alternatives for a cheaper pad. It has to be the Apple product. Wow.
Has to be Apple iPad, 32 gigabyte minimum.
Wow.
Are they sponsored?
I mean, I went
by
to
iPad
a primary school.
Sorry, Mark. What?
Sorry, I was going to say I went to primary school in a very small village, which was it's a very basic Church of England primary school. I went back there only a few years ago because I was working a job where I was supplying technical stuff, and it's like NASA. They've got interactive whiteboards. They do all their homework by email. They all have their own web page. It's quite scary.
It does make sense because the world's moved on, and that's what, like I said earlier, that's what they've grown up with. So they're expecting it, and if it makes them intelligent and clever, that's great. But it is a shame because I
do worry whether their handwriting suffers
it does.
because they're using keyboards all the
Mine
time.
has.
Mine has as well. Yeah, definitely. But, when we get that huge solar flare that knocks out all the electricity in the world, then, we'll be the ones they'll be coming to.
They'll be coming to me for the shovel and chalk. Yeah.
That's right.
I can make fire with a box of matches.
Yeah, a big thing here in the States is a lot of school districts, a lot of school states are no longer mandating that you teach cursive writing.
Right.
What's that?
Which used to be it was a part of the curriculum.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
Cursive is where all of the letters have
joined up letters.
Yeah, sorry,
together
I misheard you.
as opposed to printing. Yeah.
Sorry,
right,
I thought you said
printing.
Sorry, I thought you said cursor.
Cursive, which astonishes me. That was just a rite of passage. You learn how to write in cursive as opposed to your little scrolling block print. But people aren't writing anymore. They just aren't. Everything is. There's so many schools that don't even have textbooks that the kids bring home because all the course materials are online. All of their homework is submitted online. Projects are done through Google Docs. It really is. It's astonishing how fast technology is changing. And you're right, the kids are keeping up with that. And it's difficult for parents who are not technically savvy to sort of keep a hand on what's happening.
I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to be the guy who's like, back in my day, we had to. Oh, jeez. Oh, no.
You're lucky. You've got a friend, Dave, who's the Apple expert. So you're okay. You've got someone on your side.
Oh, well, he's had some problems with them lately. That's a different conversation. But yeah.
One thing that strikes me with all this whole talk of how things have moved on, how everything's become digital, and it's all going that way, I was really stunned to walk through. Over here in the UK, we have a chain of bookstores called Waterstones, and right there, front and centre in their display window, was The Very Hungry Caterpillar, which I remember reading.
I've never heard of that.
When I was a wee nipper, and they haven't updated it for the 21st century, or the images are exactly the same, and it's still just as popular today, which really struck me as
45
I
years.
wonder how you would update that. Would it be like, the very hungry computer virus, or you know?
It would be.
I mean, if you look at the style of the drawings, it's very much of its time. It looks very kind of sort of 60s, 70s.
I think
you thought they might have kind of gone for a more cartoony sort of look to it, but I think that's.
It would be
I
great to
think
see
if
a
you're going to
Marvel
update it,
version.
Deb, it would be the very hungry caterpillar who has to make good diet choices and embraces a non-sedentary
no
lifestyle.
GMOs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, what about the very hungry cab driver? That'd be quite good, wouldn't it?
Oh, hungry
Now,
and
that sounds
angry.
like a Doctor Who episode. All right, well, here's a question that I have for Lee, because I have experienced this with my own children, and that I have introduced them to something that I have loved, and then they have loved it also, but they've loved it differently and wrongly.
Wrongly.
And, that is sort of a special sort of pain that lances your heart, because you're used to people being wrong on the internet.
You're doing it the wrong
Right.
way.
I'm used to that,
Your
and we
kids
try to be
can't be
tolerant.
anonymous. That's the problem, right?
Yeah.
They
So
can't
here
be
it is.
anonymous
It's
posters.
living in your house. People that
Okay.
have very differing fanish opinions about, and you both deeply love the source, but you come at it from different ways. Have you had that
Okay.
experience, Lee?
Yeah, I mean, wrongly. I'm not sure about loving it wrongly. I think he... I know what you mean, though.
I use that term in jest.
Yeah, the thing is, I've always said to Finn to be honest, because the whole thing about Doctor Who, for instance, which is a brilliant place to start. I don't know if Trekkie fans are like this, but Doctor Who fans completely understand that a lot of the episodes in the old days look shoddy, they look terrible, and a lot of the dialogue was a bit hokey, and it was all a bit cheesy. Some of it was absolute genius, as we know, but a lot of it just looks a little bit dated and not very good, really. So he would watch those and laugh, and I would explain to him why they're like they were, and so he got a real holistic view of the old classic stuff. And then when he looked at the new stuff, or when he started really getting into the new stuff, he had something to kind of, he could compare and contrast, and he would always goad me and say, oh yeah, it's a bit like the Merker, isn't it, and all this sort of thing. But generally speaking, between us, we're very honest. So, he will like a certain episode. I think, I'm trying to think of an example, but I can't at the moment. But Love and Monsters probably is a good one. That I really love Love and Monsters, but I can't stand the Absorbalov. But he absolutely loves the Absorbalov. So it's kind of, I'm saying, well, why? Why would you even go there?
You're
It's the
wrong.
most terrible
You're
thing.
wrong.
You're absolutely wrong. But we have this fantastic way of kind of laughing about it. And that's what I've always wanted to have is, and I think that's what it is with really good geek communities. You can have a good laugh, and you don't want the internet trolls ruining it for you. And you're right. You can have banter, and I think that's what's
You
needed.
can disagree, but it doesn't have to descend into.
No, it doesn't have to, and I think
You
you have
know,
to, like
Lee-
you say, really appreciate and understand other people's opinions.
Lee,
And
that is such a good lesson that you're kind of inadvertently teaching him about, because he's going to get older, and he's, there may be these conversations in regards to politics, and maybe he's learning that he can laugh with someone who may have a different point of view, and know that you don't troll people politically, because that just leads to, tears ultimately, and that's neat.
Yeah.
Okay.
See,
Yeah,
the one
everybody's got
thing,
an opinion.
the one thing in our house is like everybody can have their own opinion, but you have to be able to articulate why you have that opinion.
Yeah.
So
Deb,
I have no
Deb,
patience
wait.
for.
I got it. You need to tell them they need to articulate that opinion via cursive handwriting, and then that way
you
keep the
laugh,
tradition
but there
alive.
there have been disciplinary measures in my household that involved writing essays for me. So, yes.
On an iPad or on paper?
No, on paper and handwriting, no typing
all right,
loud.
Okay.
No.
Sorry, I
So-
didn't mean to interrupt you there. Okay.
I don't have a lot of patience for, especially a negative opinion about something. Just saying, well, I really hate that, or I really don't like that. I'm like, well, tell me why. Like, if you can articulate why, it tells me that you've thought it out, and it's not an opinion based on outside influences, or particularly, obviously, in our house we have lots of conversations about gender disparity. So there have been conversations where somebody has made a thoughtless comment of, I'm particularly thinking of my oldest son, who we were watching. It was a sporting event, and there was a very attractive female sportscaster, and he made the comment, well, you know why she got the job? And I was like, oh, let's back that one up. And let's talk about what you just said. So I think you can really those differing opinions, as long as they can articulate and you can have real conversations about them, I don't have a problem with that. But I do sort of, because at this age, children can be very, very influenced by a lot of different factors, sometimes factors they don't even realize are influencing them.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good way to really open up, communication in a fun way about something that you both really like.
Exactly.
Well, except, my heartbreaking story, and I think I told you this in email, Mark, is I waited to introduce my children to Star Wars until I felt that they were old enough to appreciate the glory that it was. And I also wanted to introduce them the right way. Starting with movie 4, 5, and 6, and then going back to the prequels, because that's how I did it.
That's how it should be done.
That's how it should be done. Unbeknownst to me, my oldest son was over a friend's house, and they decided they were going to watch Star Wars Episode 1. And he thought this was the best thing he had ever seen in his entire life, which is wonderful, except he thinks 4, 5, and 6 are crap because of the dodgy special effects. And they, and he has since revised his opinion to they're not that bad, but they're
wow, damning with faint praise.
How old is
really
he?
Stung. Well, he's 18 now, but at the time he was.
Okay.
I think he was. He may have been 8 or 9 when he saw that. And of course, you have a child protagonist who's that age, and they can really identify with that. So, which is kind of why I wanted to introduce him the right way, and I had that opportunity taken out from under me, and it has colored his perceptions of this property that I love and adore. So I think you sort of have to decide too how you're going to introduce the thing that you love to your children.
Ben, it sounds like you should have Episode 4 just playing on a loop in the background from the moment they're born, just so that can never happen.
I was going to say that maybe, that was a lesson learnt there, Debs, maybe for yourself and the rest of the world listening to this podcast. If you're going to bring kids in the world, start on Episode 4. Because by the time they get to Episode 1, they too will be thinking, most of it's codswallop.
Well, this actually brings up another question I wanted to ask, because a lot of my very immediate questions have to do with early childhood. Just right as everything is starting up. And one of my big questions was, it actually pertains to Episode 4, or Star Wars, as I like to call it. When do you let them see what you would consider to be a scary thing? Because I think there's a fine line between scary thing and nerdy thing based on how old the viewer is. And for example, I got to see Star Wars when I was 5. It was in the theater, and it's probably my earliest geeky memory. And the one big thing that I remember, because I was terrified, was when the Sand People got up on screen and they were screaming and they were beating up everybody, and it terrified me. And I distinctly remember getting up in my seat, turning around and hiding, because I was so scared of these things. And so I was trying to think, should I wait until the child is a little bit older, because daddy knows that the really scary Sand People are coming, and I don't want to do that to them. Or do I? I don't know.
Again, I know in my personal experience, every child, even within the same family, is going to have different fear thresholds.
Yeah.
And
fear threshold. Nice. Okay.
Okay. And only you can judge that. I mean, my oldest son was more timid in what he liked to watch when he was younger. I think my youngest daughter could probably watch The Walking Dead without having her stomach turn. Not that I let her do that, mind you, but
No.
she is fearless. She likes scary things. She likes to be scared. Obviously it's not an appropriate show. I never would let her watch that. But I'm just saying, I sat down to watch Raiders of the Lost Ark with my oldest son when he was about 10. Don't ever do that with a child who has a low fear threshold, because that is really
Nazis.
creepy. And we probably got about 20 minutes in, and I realized my mistake. This was not a good introduction for him. He was not ready for this. So, there is no magic number. I mean, I think, I don't know, what's your experience been, Lee? Because I just know each child is so different.
Yeah, you're absolutely 100% right. They are all different, and they find the strangest things scary as well, because when Finn was watching The Unquiet Dead, he must have been, I'm just trying to think, just six. And, the first couple of Doctor Who's were fun, and then The Unquiet Dead came on, and it was the moment where the lady walked towards the screen,
the opening
screaming.
scene.
The opening scene with the eyes, right? From then on, he had a massive fear of things with big eyes, so Gollum freaked the hell out of him for a while. And he really did. He said, I can't deal with it. I can't deal with anything with big eyes. Ooh, even in kids' storybooks, big eyes freaked him out. And for ages, we were trying to work out what the problem was, and then we got it back to that opening scene, and he said that he could not watch that again, ever. But he did put it on, a year or two back, and he went, "Oh, yeah, that's pretty scary, but I'm okay with it. That's fine." But for all those years, I've been terrified. And
Mark Gatiss, you've got a lot to answer
Mark,
for.
I'm going to have him. No, he wouldn't go to sleep. He'd have nightmares, and I thought, that wasn't right. That tipped it.
Yeah,
Whereas Holly,
too
strangely enough, like your daughter Deb's, you could probably sit her through, 6 episodes of The Walking Dead, and she'd be absolutely fine. I caught her watching Insidious. Insidious, is that right? Mm-hmm. The film
Insidious.
That's it. Sorry, Insidious. I don't even know if it's a word. And also the Shaun of the Dead, which at her age, when she was 13, shouldn't really have been watching because of the swearing. But I thought, in a way, I was kind of proud of her, but at the same time, I had to tell her off for enjoying Shaun of the Dead so much. But you're right, they have got different thresholds, and Holly is hard as nails, and Finn is harder. He's a lot harder, but he can't watch anything creepy or ghostly because that freaks him out. And I think that was due to that Mark Gatiss episode, The Fool. Oh. What did he write it for?
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
But it's funny, too. Another thing that I have found is creating an artificial sense of excitement that you can do with your children. Like, I love the BBC series Sherlock.
Oh, yeah.
And I knew that my daughter would really, really like Sherlock. Now, it is, it's a slightly more mature story, but it's not so mature that she couldn't have handled it. But I told her that you had to be 13 to be able to watch Sherlock. And this was probably 6 months, it hit her radar probably about 6 months before she turned 13. And this turned into a really big event. She was 13 years old. I let her watch it on Netflix, on her Nook. She has a Nook. And I sort of created a test tube fangirl for Sherlock because I heightened it to be something really an event, sort of a transformative thing. You were now a teenager. You were allowed to watch this show. And I don't know whether if I had just said, "Oh, yeah, go ahead and watch that," whether she would have enjoyed it as much or she would have been enthralled enough to go back and read the original source stories. And
now she's responsible for 90% of the gifts that are knocking around on Tumblr.
Well, maybe. No, she does not. She's not allowed on Tumblr. She does not have a Tumblr account. She has an Instagram and a Pinterest, which I also, have access to.
I just started using Pinterest, and it's kind of cool, but I need to perhaps have more spare time to.
You need to be
find
20 years
interesting
younger.
things to pin. Well, there is that. Yeah.
So as a parent, if there's something that you really, really like, you can sort of create this event around letting them consume it.
That's a really cool way of doing it.
It is. It's a really cool way of doing it. I love that idea. Finn has only just started watching Sherlock now. And I've got to say, he watched the first one. I wasn't sure whether he'd be into it or not. But of course, it's written so fantastically. It's one of the best things on TV as far as I'm concerned. He instantly got hooked. He said, I didn't understand half of that, but it was brilliant. And to me, I thought, that's great. That means he's going to go back and keep watching it until he gets all the bits. And it's going to be one of those programmes that he'll always remember. In fact, he's gone out and bought all 3 box sets straight away because he loved it so much.
That's fun.
Yeah, I know.
Now, I have a question for you, because I tend to be a little bit more strict about what I let them watch visually, and I'm not quite as strict about what I let them read. And I was curious to see what how you approach that, because I know when I was always a big reader, and when I was very young, I wanted to read Gone with the Wind. Big book here in the States, made a movie of it. It's an incredibly adult book, but it's also a really good historical romp. And I was in 5th grade, which means I was probably 10 and a half when I wanted to read it. My mother said no, and of course I snuck it and read it anyway. And so we sat down and had a conversation about it, and all the things that my mother questioned me about are things that, because I didn't have the scope to understand them, they really didn't sink in, all the adultery and all the sex things, because it was sort of it wasn't anything that was on my personal radar. So I kind of glossed over those bits and just focused on the things that I liked. And I kind of think you can do that in written material. You really can't do that as much in viewed material. So I didn't know where you came down as a parent on how strict you are about what your children consume in sort of geek culture.
That's a really, really good question again, isn't it? And it's quite a big one, I'd imagine, because viewing and book reading are two different kinds of things. It is interesting. Viewing, I think, interestingly, Sherlock is quite grown up, I think. So there are things like, dead people on tables and things are quite scary. Mm-hmm. And that's, I can't remember what the rating is, 12 or something, but...
Not to mention dominatrixes.
Well, he hasn't got to that bit yet. We'll see how he copes with that. But exactly, I'm saying I don't mind him watching it. He's 14, and I think he's ready. And you have to judge your own children, because some kids are ready at 12 and 13 to almost watch anything. I mean, I was watching zombie films when I was 12 behind my mum and dad's back, Zombie Dawn of the Dead and all that, and I absolutely loved it. And it didn't affect me, but
we'll be the judge of that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I got scared and I had a few nightmares about certain things, but it didn't do me any harm. As far as the sexual things are concerned, I remember watching Death Wish when I was probably about 10. Around a neighbour's, and they put it on for me. It was a bit weird, actually, thinking about it now. But anyway, and there's a horrible rape scene in it, and a person falls onto a gate and stabs himself. It's the most horrific thing, and it stayed with me forever. And I hated any films that had anything to do with that situation in it. I don't care how clever that was, it just completely frightened me. So you have to, that kind of thing didn't escape my radar because it was very visual. Whereas I think you're right, if you were to read that in a book, I would have just skated over that, and it wouldn't have made any difference. So for instance, when I read To Kill a Mockingbird, which I remember one of the people in the books is accused of raping, you don't, as a kid, visualise what that's all about. You just hear the word and you kind of guess what it is and move on. And I think you're quite right. Unless it's really, really detailed, like a Clive Barker novel, the actual gore is really detailed, then I think you should be okay giving your kids most things. But it'd be a good idea to read it yourself if you think it might be a bit dodgy, for instance. But no, you're right. You do have this strange radar that you can gloss over when you read. Your imagination's powerful, but you can push things to one side because you're not looking at it. But when it's in your face, you don't get a chance. And one last thing. Very recently, I watched Jude the Obscure in order to watch Christopher Eccleston. I say recently, 9 years ago. But it was the most horrendous ending to that story, and I hadn't read it. But when I saw it, it had me for weeks. I couldn't get it out of my head. It was the most horrendous ending, and I just thought visually, that director didn't need to put that in there, and it was just horrible. And it affected me a lot. So even as an adult, visually things can completely shake me. But you have to be a bit... I wouldn't show that to my kids, for instance, but I would let them read the book. Yeah, good question.
So I should let him read Star Wars before he sees Star Wars.
Yeah.
And that's been with my youngest daughter has wanted to watch the Hunger Games movies, which are PG-13, and that's a good guideline. PG-13 is a really good guideline. Some kids are ready at 12, some kids aren't ready at 13.
So you like the rating system? Because it seems like our today is different than when I was a kid.
I think it's a guideline. I think you have to have some sort of rough guideline, and then you can apply that to your own children. But I told her, I said, if you can read the Hunger Games books, I will let you watch the Hunger Games movies. So that was sort of, there's all these tricks that you have to do to gauge whether they're ready to consume materials, because they're, especially in our house, you're just barraged by... there's boys that like the superhero movies and are into gaming, and we've had to have gaming restrictions put on because they're playing games that are certainly not appropriate for the younger ones to watch. So there's certain areas of the house where they can play certain games, and they have
the Halo room.
Yeah, we have the Call of Duty, and this is because my son's 18 and he's online with his friends, and they're playing first person shooter games, which we've also had a lot of conversations about before that was allowed to happen. But you don't want your younger children exposed to that, and you guys don't have to worry about that because you only have one. But if you do have more than one child, especially if there is an age gap, you have to be careful how much your younger children are exposed to, because it will seep in whether you want it to or not.
You know, it's funny. You guys keep talking about the issues that I haven't even thought about yet because I'm not thinking past the kid being like 10. And there's all this stuff that I haven't even thought about now, and I'm slowly
we've scared you
contemplating.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well,
Ben, by the end of the podcast, you're just going to be curled up in the corner, rocking forwards and
Well,
back.
we should come up with some baby things, like introducing
okay,
your
here's a baby
babies
thing.
to
Here's kind of an early question. Okay, part of this is I keep thinking about the dumbest questions in my head, and in my head they make sense. But once I say it out loud, it sounds completely stupid. And this is a good example of one. Okay, all right, here we go. Stupid question time. Do I have to wait for the kid to understand the concept of reality before showing him something fantasy? Does that make sense?
No.
Like, does the kid
no.
need to truly understand that magic is not real before I show him Harry Potter? Because I don't want to confuse them. Is that dumb?
Wow.
Is that?
No, are you into science? Do you like real life?
Oh yeah,
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, you can do the two.
Okay.
Quite easily, really, I think, because kids do separate stuff off naturally. And with things like science, they'll do things at school where they grow plants and look at bugs and stuff like that and look inside bugs, and they understand that science. And then simply when you show them Bing and Bong from the Planet Mars cartoon or whatever, they will know that that's a telly program and it's not real. They're very good at separating these things off, I think. Mm-hmm. I think the scary thing is something like Deb said about the Call of Duty, when you have something reality-based warfare where you're blowing people's faces clean off, and that really does happen in the world. It's quite a horrendous thing. Normally an 18, 16-year-old is okay, they can handle it, they know it's not real, blah, blah, blah. But a 10, 12-year-old or 5, 6-year-old, obviously they're going to be thinking, that's okay, is that normal? And the more you feed them that, the more they're going to get brainwashed into thinking that that's the right thing. That's an extreme example. But I think when you're very, very early on, you're quite safe. I mean, the Teletubbies, never really screwed up my daughter. And the Tweenies are equally science fiction in their own weird way. Another kind of strange stuff that's on telly. Whatever you do, though, don't ever show your kids Barney, because that will definitely melt their brain.
I don't know.
It'll melt your brain.
We had Barney fans in my house, so I've seen my fair share of Barney. I think they're fine.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've yet recovered.
Did you have the compulsion to go out and stab dinosaurs in the face?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the other thing is Bear in the Big Blue House is another one. I just can't bear those two.
Well, that's just good survival skills. Dinosaurs and bears will eat me.
Well, here's another really hard lesson as a parent. The things that you're taking away from Barney and Bear in the Big Blue House are not the things that your children are taking away from that. They are taking it, they're looking at it very unironically. They're looking at the message that is being conveyed is the message that they're receiving, which is sharing and kindness and all these other things. You're dying, you're actually gagging at the saccharine obnoxiousness of it all, and your children can be enraptured by this. And you have to, before you sort of dismiss something as saying, this is treacle and this is awful, and why am I exposing my child to this, is sort of, well, what is the takeaway? What are they trying to say? Is that message worth it? So should I really be discouraging my child from watching something that they really like?
Do you want your child to know it's good to share?
Right. So I've watched some really awful television, and it's all, educational television, really good stuff that I just could not stomach. And again, that's part of tamping down your expectations as a parent. And, of course you want to introduce them to the cooler things as well. I always said as a geek parent, your child will always have the very best T-shirts ever because you have that eye. But yeah, you kind of have to sometimes accept the fact that they're going to like something that you absolutely loathe, like Dora the Explorer or something else that PBS is going to throw at you,
But it's interesting, isn't it, that we are talking almost as if we haven't got the power to turn the telly off, or direct them away from Dora the Explorer. Because at that age, I don't suppose. Yeah,
but they all have cell phones and iPads now. So do we actually have that power?
Oh God, yeah.
But
under fives.
Yeah, it's hard because the things. My daughters love Dora the Explorer, and they knew Dora the Explorer Spanish by the time they entered kindergarten. Which is that a bad thing? No, that's certainly not a bad thing.
No.
But yeah, it's you're right. You do have the ability to turn something off, and as a parent, I think we need to exercise that frequently.
Yeah, but do you know what? At 3 o'clock in the morning, if you've got to sit there and watch a really terrible cartoon with your kids, you're going to do it, aren't you? Just to shut them up.
Absolutely.
I did use a distraction tactic the other day because Tom was a little bit cranky. I had the iPad and I managed to dredge up a 40-year-old episode of Sesame Street.
Yay!
Oh, the good ones.
I don't know if it was like a compilation of the best bits, but it just seemed to be one heck of an episode. You have the Mana Mana song. You had It's Not Easy Being Green. You had Stevie Wonder doing Superstition. Wow. It was amazing. He loved it.
70s Sesame Street is amazing.
Really good stuff. But then again, your children could also introduce you to wonderful things like Phineas and Ferb, which I adore.
Simon, who we do the Blue Box podcast with, he's a big fan of that.
Oh,
see, this is completely new to me. What is this? What's the
Phineas and Ferb is a Disney program. And it is, I don't know if anybody, I'm showing my age because this was showing, on UHF reruns when I was young, was Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Rocky and Bullwinkle was a fantastic show as a child, but watching Rocky and Bullwinkle as an adult, it's hysterical because there was a whole different level of humor that was aimed at adults that sort of like, that glossing over thing that we talked about, the kids just never got. But, again, watching it as an adult, Phineas and Ferb is very, very similar. My children are laughing at the humor on one level, and my husband and I are laughing at the humor on a very adult level. So it has that wit to it. And the creators are Doctor Who fans, so every now and then something slips in, which is really fun. But it is a really fun show that is smart and intelligent, and it has a good message. But the kids take lots of risks and do crazy things, so it's not. There's enough fantasy involved in it that the kids think it's really cool too.
I will look into that. And actually, on the Rocky and Bullwinkle, you just triggered something in my memory. I learned the concept that there are other countries from watching Rocky and Bullwinkle. The whole concept that I live in a certain country and people live in a different country, different from the one that I that concept never occurred to me or was illustrated to me until I was a kid watching Rocky and Bullwinkle for some reason.
Do you think that's a very American perspective?
Probably. Or just the fact that mom and dad hadn't gotten around to getting a globe or a map and showing me where I live,
Yeah, well, Mark, I always thought it was just Parkstone in Poole, which is where I was brought up, and when we got to the edge of the sea, that was it. We're an island, so
the end of the world.
So the world ends. Yeah.
I think the one thing you can do too as a parent of a very young child is just expose them to a lot of different cultural things and a lot of different the one thing that sort of really makes me crazy, and even now as a child of the mother of a child entering the tweenhood, is the gendering of things. There's blue things for boys and pink things for girls, and it's and if you do have a girl, I think boys, it's a little bit easier because you guys are the default. Everything sort of defaults male, where women and little girls tend to be put in a box of glitter and princesses and things.
So boys can have science kits and girls can have sewing kits.
Yes, exactly. And I think especially if you do end up having a little girl, Ben, is to try to expose her to lots of things. It's certainly okay if they like glitter and princesses and all that stuff. But
I like glitter and princesses. I got no problem with that.
Who doesn't? Come on. But even
you should see the mic I'm talking into. It's bedazzled like you wouldn't believe.
Now I really want to bedazzle my mic now. Mine's really dull. But even and especially I think it's just as important for little boys as well, so they don't grow up with that idea that girls are different and girls can't do the same things that they do. So I think exposing children very young to this idea of a gender neutrality, but still allowing them to like what they like, is really important.
You know what, Deb? You said that Dora the Explorer kind of gets under your skin, but think about it. That's a female character going out and doing amazing things.
Oh, absolutely.
When I was a kid, you're right. The cartoons were always very male-based, and it's never occurred to me. Hey, here's some parenting advice that someone gave me that I thought was really good. Even though you guys say I probably shouldn't listen to other parenting advice, but I'm listening to you give me advice on not to take advice. You see my problem.
No, you should listen to all the advice. You should listen to all the advice and then take what you think is worthy out and discard the rest.
Because here's a good one.
piece of advice, though.
Here's a good one. My friend Greg, they don't have cable, they don't have satellite, and they rarely watch the over-the-air channels, but they do have Netflix. And he has a couple of kids. They're 5 and 7. And they watch cartoons on the online streaming on the Netflix. You know, they love it. But because they're not watching TV that's being broadcast, they are not seeing any toy commercials. All they are seeing are the actual programs. So whenever it gets to be about Christmas time, they are not being brainwashed by the toy commercial blitzes. And consequently, they aren't coming to Greg and demanding the hottest toy that they have been taught to, want. So Greg is actually able to get them toys based on what they actually like. I don't know. It just sounds like such a neat experiment to kind of cut a kid off from the, commercial brainwashing that can come from TV
How hard
commercials.
is it, though, once they start going to school? Because all their schoolmates are going to be talking about, well, I saw this on this channel, I saw this on this channel.
Well,
Are you
I don't know.
in danger of kind of cutting them off from their peers because they're not enjoying the same things?
Well,
Maybe.
yeah,
I don't know. It's hard.
the toys side of thing, it depends on what it is, doesn't it? I mean, if, for instance, the Teletubbies, Cabbage Patch Kids, I think was the same kind of craze. Everybody had to have one. All the kids had to
You
have
had
one.
parents fighting each other for Teletubbies.
It was the
That
most hilarious. There's probably some
bizarre.
video footage of people outside certain superstores in Britain punching each other to get a Teletubby because they just really wanted it for Christmas. I mean, that's again, it's entirely up to you how far you want to go with supplying children their wishes and their delights.
I just thought it was really cool because they didn't know that it was something that society told them that they must have.
And I'm assuming it'll give you a far greater control over what they're getting to see as well.
Now, of course, granted, the kids aren't really in grade school yet, or they're just starting on grade school. But his daughter is really into science, so he got her a telescope, and she absolutely loves it. And that may not have happened if she'd been brainwashed into wanting the Cabbage Patch or whatever the kids are into today. I'm such an old man sounding right here. I love it.
Kids are really smart, too. I mean, don't ever discount children's sort of native intelligence. And all it takes is getting that one hot, desired toy and discovering that it is not all that, or it is shoddy construction, or it breaks, or doesn't work the way that it shows on television. And they remember that. And all of a sudden, I think they get a little skeptical about things. And it's also, I mean, television commercials, again, you don't realize as a parent how much of your life turns into teachable moments. And television commercials are sort of one of those things that, you say, okay, well, do you really think it's going to work that way? Or do you really think that when you get it, you're going to be able to make...
You're like the opposite of Father Christmas.
Yeah, I'm like Debbie Downer, let me tell you. But, you could really talk about how the manipulation of marketing with your kids, because they will get that crap toy eventually, because once they go to school, everybody's talking about, I have to have this. This is the one thing that, everybody at school's getting and they're playing with, and your kid's going to pick up on that. The influences on your children are going to be wide and many, and not just by television.
Because like in the 1980s when I was going to grade school, I really didn't like war things. I wasn't into soldiers, but G.I. Joe was on TV, and G.I. Joe commercials were constant, and I felt this odd need to have some G.I. Joe figures. And I got them. I didn't really play with them, but I still felt like I absolutely needed them. And I was a victim of the brainwashing, I guess.
It's almost like a virus that creeps into your children's life of the thing that is hot at the moment. And last summer for us, it was, I don't know if you guys had this in the UK, it was the rainbow loom. And the rainbow loom was this bit of plastic that had knobs on it, and you took very brightly colored rubber bands and you wove them through this thing, and you could make bracelets and necklaces and things.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't one kid that had this. It was every kid that I knew. Wherever 2 or more kids gathered, there was rainbow looms being loomed upon. And it wasn't that there was a TV commercial, and it wasn't that we saw any, it was sort of like a virus that just came up out of the ground, and everybody all of a sudden became the hot thing to have. And nobody could figure out who had the first one or where. And both my daughters were on a swim team last year. So we would go to swim meets, and every swim club and every swimming pool we went to, it was the same thing. It was really creepy. If aliens were trying to take over the world, they could have done so last summer through brightly colored rubber bands and Ray-Ban looms.
Hey, we said at the start of this episode that you shouldn't, take everyone's advice to heart. You should make your own decisions. But I'm going to be emailing Deb every 5 minutes now.
Oh yeah,
she's
tell me
genius.
what I should do in this instance. Well, hey Deb, this proves how absolutely disconnected I am with kid culture. I mean, we live 2 states away from each other, and until this moment, I have never heard of the rainbow loom thing. Never. And
it could be regional,
just sort
I
of
don't
hearing
know.
you talk about it, it sounds
Makes you want one.
yes, but also it doesn't sound as bad as, say, getting the latest Angry Birds game. It sounds like something that kids are actually making, and there's this social aspect to it. And
Until you were the parent waiting in line at the store to buy the last rainbow loom, and everybody had to have the glow-in-the-dark rubber band pack, and there was only 3 left, and it turned into an angry mob. Oh, yeah. That wasn't bad at all. No.
Glow in the dark. That's so cool.
so I'm going to need to learn some mob survival skills, is what you're telling me. Yeah.
Definitely. And get a tent, because you're going to need it.
A tent? Why?
And a piece of 2x4
Well, you need
as
to
well.
camp outside the superstore at 3 o'clock in the morning in front of everybody else, you see.
Oh, okay.
Well,
So I
Lee,
can't just
did any of
pre-order
your?
it.
I'm curious to see if any of Lee's children ever got caught up into some big sort of the thing that everybody had to have.
Yeah, they did. It was called the Tweenies. I don't know if you got them in America. There were
Never heard of
4 kind of, 4 characters that look very odd. They look a bit like The Simpsons, really, in reality, and they do singing and dancing. They got a number 1 track over here in the pop charts, and they were really big. And because they were music-based, and my daughter, even at 4, 5, 6, she loved music. That's what really, that's what she wanted. And everything had to be Tweenies, everything. And she went for the guy called Jake, who was the one that was always really stupid. And it's like, oh man, we've got to have this face in our house all the time. But yeah, she did. She
Ringo.
got caught up in that. And, I think it was an odd thing. She went to school and everybody was like, Tweenies this, Tweenies that. And she'd have her Jake. And one day it went missing. Oh my God, the hell we went through to try and get exactly the same one back again. It was horrible.
Oh, that's a good parenting tip too. If there's something that your
get a
child
spare.
adores, buy 2. Because if
Yes,
you lose
absolutely.
one, then you will have a backup, because there is no hell like a child who is missing that one special thing.
Honestly, Deb, that's sort of how I am with my toys now. I buy a
Well,
backup
see?
of every
There
Doctor
you
Well,
Who
go.
figure.
can I just ask you and Mark a question then? I know how me and Debs have probably react to this one, but I'm interested to see what you think. When your kids are growing up and they're getting into the stuff that you're into, you've obviously got your Doctor Who figures and your Dalek figures. How are you going to feel when they are pointing at them and going, Daddy, can I play with that? Daddy, can I play with that?
That's why I
I'm
bought
quite
2
happy
of
with
them. Keep one safe. Actually, that's a great point. I don't know, Mark. What do you think you might do?
I'm quite happy with that. I mean, our living room is a bit of a tacked museum. It's got lots of Doctor Who figures and stuff all over the place. And
Yeah, but not
I
with
think it's
not
great.
with one arm broken and a head chewed.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think I've.
That's called customizing, Lee. You make it.
We have a mutual friend, JR, who's the brains behind the Blue Box podcast, and he collects them like you would not believe, the Doctor Who figures. And I think he would probably have some kind of mental breakdown if anything happened to them.
Yeah, he would. Yeah.
So I'm not really that precious in that way. And I remember as a kid, we had the Star Wars figures. My brother was that bit older than me. He was about 4 or 5 years older than me. And he had all the Star Wars figures. I remember spending hours and hours playing with those figures and creating my own stories. So I think it's really good. It fires their imagination. So
Yeah.
I would be more than happy for them to play with them.
Well, that's very brave.
That is quite brave.
We had a Slitheen. We had Christopher Eccleston and Slitheen telecom set sort of thing. Where, it's a CB set. You talk to each other.
Walkie-talkies.
Walkie-talkie, that's the word. I'm trying to go across the Atlantic. And
Telecom sounds so much cooler, though, than walkie-talkie.
But it's true. You speak into their tummies. They're the most bizarre toys.
Really?
But they were quite...
Ben already thinks that we're everything over in the UK is steampunk.
It is pretty much. It was basically steampunk in a Slitheen. And you press the button and you talk to each other through these bellies. It's really weird. But they were quite nice models. And the Slitheen model is a gorgeous model. And my son kind of left it out, and a cousin came over and played, in inverted commas, with it and broke the arms off. And we couldn't do anything about it. They were broken. And, of course, that first year of Eccleston stuff saturated the market, but then disappeared completely in the second year for the Tennant stuff to come out. And we couldn't get them. We couldn't get them again. So we've forever got this broken kind of Slitheen. But that is a child just playing with a toy. So you have to be ready that, Mark, that your silencers are going to end up, with legs missing and bite marks.
I do not have a lot of action figures because I went through that madness with another fandom that I was involved in, and now
What was that fandom? Curious.
It was Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh,
I have cartons of Buffy the Vampire Slayer tat. That you sort of, and then again, once you have children, you realize how much tat they come with, and all of a sudden, you will never own so much plastic made in China in your life until you have children.
Oh yeah.
Are you kidding? The reason I want a kid
started.
is for all of the accessories. That's why I want a baby. Come on.
Oh, there's so many to be had. So I've not really bought into the whole Doctor Who thing, but I have so many Doctor Who books and magazines and. So we have a lot of conversations about treating books properly, which I just think is good to have, period. If you're going to read the comic books, you have to make sure your hands are clean. You can't dog-ear the edges and that sort of thing. So that you have to be old enough to be responsible to hold a book in order to have the Doctor Who books.
Definitely.
Well, could I ask everybody a weird question? Something that, like the other ones haven't been. One of the things I love when I talk to people who are obviously as geeky as I am, can you guys think back to when your earliest geek memory was that was sort of a defining moment that really kind of set you on the road to being a geek, where you would favor nerdy stuff more than something like, say, cars or moose hunting or sports, Like, what exactly was that defining moment? Do you guys know?
I think we should let Lee go first, because I think he has to disappear pretty soon.
I do. I've got to go and see.
Sorry, Lee.
That's okay. No, it's me. I've got to go and see Godzilla. Hey,
that's your moment.
That's my moment. No, my moment was buying my first Star Wars figure back in 78, 79. I can't remember when they first put them out. But I think it was Hammerhead. It might have been Hammerhead in the first run. And I bought it from a place called Lavers, which got shut down eventually for nefarious reasons, but never mind. And it was a toy shop, and I remember going in and buying it and having it and ripping the cover off and playing with it non-stop. And it was something like 49p, something like that, really dead cheap. And that was it, because, of course, it wasn't just one figure, was it? It was Star Wars figures, so you could collect the lot of them. And I didn't stop, so we collected and collected and collected.
And they showed you all the ones you could get on the back of the packet.
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely. And you could cut out the little name tags, like C-3PO and Luke Skywalker, the actual name tags. You cut them out, you send them off, and you could get yourself a Boba Fett, or Boba Fett, depending on which era you come from. And it was, oh wow, yeah, those were heady days for those 5 years of collecting Star Wars figures, and obviously going into my room, my brother's room, and stealing his Doctor Who magazine, his first one, and reading that. Those two moments were definitely a defining moment when I realised I was an absolute nerd.
Yeah, it's like a moment of self-awareness. Like, well, I know who I am. That's great.
I'm sorry, I can't kick a ball, I can't play tennis, but I can.
We're going to have to say goodbye to Lee now, so thank you so much for coming on the show. It's really good to have you on.
It's been a real blast.
Good to meet you, Lee.
We'll get you back again soon.
It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Take care, guys, and have a good rest of the podcast.
Enjoy Godzilla.
Cheers.
Thank you for all the advice, and tell me how scary Godzilla is and whether I should take my unborn baby to see it. Okay.
Definitely take your unborn baby.
Right.
Take care.
Thanks, Lee. Bye. Well, I'm going to chip in with my own little story. I've mentioned this a few times on the Blue Box podcast, and it's still it makes me depressed now thinking about
Depressed?
it.
Oh no!
I'm a very bitter person. In my formative years, I must have been about 6 years old, and my hero was Tom Baker.
Okay.
He was the doctor. There was no other person. I wasn't aware at this point that there were any other doctors. He was the doctor, and he was my hero. And my brother, who's that little bit older than me, would watch Doctor Who, but he wasn't really that bothered about it. And we both went to the same primary school, and he had the chance to enter a competition. They were doing a sort of inter-schools competition. You had to design an alien, and his class was the sort of the oldest class in our primary school. So they got to design this monster that looked like a kind of red Christmas tree with arms and legs. And they entered against all these other schools, and they would go to this place local to us, and none other than Tom Baker, in his full Fourth Doctor costume, came down to judge the competition.
Really?
So he and all his schoolmates got to go and meet Tom Baker, but I was not allowed to go. I was too young, and I was very, very, very upset. My mum tried to make it up to me by bringing back a toy that she'd won in the raffle at the event, but I was inconsolable. So, and we still have photos. I actually scanned in a photo the other day of Tom Baker, which I think my mum must have taken when he was meeting the kids. And yeah, it still breaks my heart today.
Oh no! Oh, I'm so sorry.
That is so sad.
And it was then that I knew I was a nerd. Yeah.
I feel like I want to call him up or send him an email and say, "Seek out Mark Cochran and heal his wounds, Mr. Baker, please." Oh, that's.
What about you, Deb? Do you have a defining moment?
I think my defining moment was, the first time I saw Star Wars, Episode 4, sitting in the theater and watching, the starship come across the screen, because you had never seen anything like that ever. It's 1977, and special effects are, were still a little dodgy, and they were feeling their way. So, what
the
Lucas
music at that part.
Yeah, but even what Lucas did for science fiction films was just astonishing. So, I just remember that moment on a visceral level, and I went out and I bought the trading cards, and I had action figures, and I think I had the album of the music. But really, that I was kind of geeky about Star Wars when that was out. But really, I was more of a book geek. To the point of tracking down different editions of things that I loved, and
was
it
this
wasn't
before Star Wars that you?
No,
were
this was kind of after Star Wars. In my teen years,
right.
I was more of a book geek. I wasn't, I was never really into comic books or anything, and it wasn't until, sort of adulthood that I rediscovered my geekiness and how compelling and passionate that you can become over something. And I think I'm probably geekier now in adulthood than I was as a kid, to be perfectly honest. But.
I was going to say, you're making up for it now.
I'm definitely making up for it now, but it was Star Wars that really hit me in the gut and stuck with me for all of those years, to the point, I was at every opening day release, and when the movies were re-released, I was there. That was sort of my formative fandom. Even though I didn't.
I'm sorry. I was just going to ask. You said that you had to kind of rediscover your geekiness. Did you kind of fall from it just naturally because you got more into books, or was there this stigma that you kept running into that being a geek is bad?
There wasn't a stigma at all. It was just more, my interest lay elsewhere in the things that,
She discovered boys.
Well, yeah, there was boys, and I was really
boys
busy.
Discovered Deb.
I was in band, so I played in an orchestra. I did, I had a lot of activities, a lot of things that I was involved in, and it just kind of fell off my radar a little bit. Certainly, I don't remember a stigma to it at all, other than the really weird Star Trek people who would wear ears to school, and they were kind of strange. But I think if you went to school wearing Spock ears now, people would probably give you the side eye. Still, but yeah, no, it just wasn't something that stuck with me. It wasn't an interest that stuck with me. But then when I sort of rediscovered that as an adult, and discovered that, and I've talked about this origin story in so many different places and things that I've written, but the level of discourse surrounding these properties has changed. It wasn't just when I was younger, it was more people throwing facts at each other. Do you know how many starships were here and what weapons were used and what planets were visited? And now it's more, people are talking about geek culture the way that people talked about literature and dissected literature now. And it's become much more respected to talk about comic books in, or television programs or movies in a way that we used to dissect and talk about and sort of critique and analyze literature. So I think it's how we approach the conversation in a way that I'm really comfortable and really, really enjoy. And that wasn't so much, I wasn't so much a fact kid. That didn't interest me as much to sort of one-up people. So it's probably why I fell away from it a little bit, because it just...
No, that totally makes sense.
How about you then, Ben?
Sorry, what?
So how about you? What was your defining moment?
What made me a geek? Probably seeing Dimensions in Time about 3 years ago for the first time. I was hooked for life.
That's hardcore.
That was it. Never going back. This world exists? This is for me. No, actually, not to steal your defining moment, Deb, but I think what made me a geek was seeing Star Wars. But, and I stress this, it was seeing Star Wars in 1978. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is because... sure, I was five. It was the perfect age where it grabbed me and would not let me go. But the point is that it was in the late 70s when you had no fancy DVD or YouTube. The concept of a home video market did not even exist. Mm-hmm. So for all I knew, seeing Star Wars in the theater was the only time that I would ever see it ever. Yeah. Because my dad never took us to see the same movie twice, ever. Mm-hmm. So say you're an impressionable, potential nerdy kid in 1978. You see Star Wars in that context. One chance only, and then it was gone. Star Wars left such an amazing impression that I became obsessed with simply trying to remember it, to keep it in my head. And I think that's why I got so obsessed with the merchandise and the action figures and the books and the bed sheets even. Because it was all this wild, insane attempt to try and preserve the movie in my memory. And I think that the fight to keep it in my memory turned me into a geek, because I would get obsessive about things. Mm-hmm.
Ben, I bought the very first tie-in novel, Splinter in the Mind's Eye, where before they had determined that Luke and Leia would be brother and sister, it's really creepy because there's a love interest there. It was the very first Star Wars, and I still have it. I still have that book.
Oh, that's great.
Because
that's so great.
That's awesome.
It was... same thing. I wanted to what's going to happen next. You knew there was going to be more movies, but you just were, I don't want to leave this world. I want to live here now. This is my place.
Well, but also it's just like, I agree. But you still got that book. I've still got some of the packaging and the cards from the action figures, and I didn't keep it because I was some obsessive 5-year-old collector thinking I was going to sell it later. It's because each package had a photo of the character or the or the spaceship. So I would study them and try to remember what the film was like. So it's sort of like, because I never conceived of a way that I could ever see Star Wars ever again. It was like Star Wars was just this flash in the pan. It came and went, and all I had left were blurry photos. Mark, it's like Bigfoot. It's like I saw Bigfoot. Nobody believes me. All I have is this blurry photo to prove it. And
Deb, we need to let you in on this. Ben's other obsession, apart from Doctor Who, is Bigfoot. We're not talking the sort of level where he believes Bigfoot's real.
Oh, I don't believe it's real.
Well, I don't think so anyway. No. But you do have quite an interest in the personalities that claim to hunt Bigfoot.
I'll tell you what it is. It's exactly like Lee was saying with with his son being terrified by the things with big eyes. It's this Bigfoot scared me at a certain point in my childhood. So it kind of became this fear that I kind of had in my head my entire life. But now that I'm older, I'm cool with it. I'm more fascinated with the people that are into it, and it's like a big soap opera drama. But hey, you know what, guys? I think to give my potential baby the true Star Wars experience, I can only show it the movie one time and then like throw it out, because they gotta go through what I went through. They gotta get the books and get the toys.
So you're gonna make them wait 4 years or whatever until they get to see Empire Strikes Back.
Absolutely.
I still have my Empire Strikes Back trading cards. I bought a lot of bubblegum.
Ooh. Oh, really?
Yeah, back in 1980, whatever.
Did you put the photo cards in a certain order, try to remember how the movie went?
Well, they had a puzzle on the back, so I'm trying to make the puzzle and everything.
Okay.
And then I had a little box that I kept them in, and would shuffle through and find my favorite Han Solo scenes, and as you do. You do what you do, don't judge.
You just reminded me of another question.
Hey, we're not judging.
I have a friend, actually Paul's wife, Mark. She said that the moment her sort of noticing boys was sort of awakened was when she saw Empire Strikes Back, and Han Solo. She didn't know why she was kind of liking him more, but she kind of did. Deb, was Han Solo sort of your first crush? You're sort of like, I like him. I'm not sure why.
You know who my first crush was? My first television sort of crush, which probably ties along with Star Wars, was, I believe, Bruce Boxleitner, who was a character in How the West Was Won, which is a miniseries that aired here in the States. Probably
wasn't he in Tron as well?
Yeah, he was in Tron. I think it was Bruce Boxleitner. I can't remember, but he played a character who was wrongfully ended up getting in a bad situation and was on the lam. He was on the run, and he hides in a barn. The barn turns out to be owned by the local sheriff, and he stumbles upon the local sheriff's daughter. So there's this whole forbidden romance thing going on. And oh my gosh, I think it really affected how. It's probably why I love fan fiction so much, because it's such a trope. But I went out and I bought that book just so I could read those passages over and over again. Because
did you start hanging out in barns hoping to meet the love of your life?
Because it was the classic. They did not like each other, but you could tell that something big was going to happen with these two characters, because they loathed each other from the beginning. Yeah, so that and I distinctly remember that sort of hitting me in my young teenage girl parts, saying, "Oh, this is really interesting." So
that's an interesting turn of phrase.
That's great.
I think it jumpstarts
you mentioned
something.
that book. That book, what was it called? The Splinter.
Splinter in a Mind's Eye. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So you read that book before Return of the Jedi, when it was suddenly retconned that Leia was Luke's sister.
I read it before Empire Strikes Back. No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it came out right after the first movie ended.
So then, whenever this retconned fact in the movie is mentioned that Luke and Leia are brother and sister, were you suddenly like, that isn't right? Or how did you take that?
Well, because, Han and Leia obviously belong together. It didn't bother me as much, but it made me not want to touch that book for a long time.
I bet.
All of a sudden, that book was really creepy, because it made so much more sense that they were brother and sister than... And again, as you know, watching Star Wars as an adult in that first movie in Episode 4, I mean, Luke is a whiny little bitch, and it makes so much more sense. These things, that you adored as children. No wonder we love this as kids, because he was us. He was like, a teenager, and
Dare I use the word Adric?
A little bit. Just a little bit.
I like Luke better than Adric. Call me blasphemous.
Well, that's not difficult. I mean,
we've really veered away from parenting, haven't we?
No, this is all
we've
important
regressed
stuff.
to our own childhood.
I want a Luke, not an Adric. So
the one thing that you had touched on, earlier, Ben, that our children have, and my children have now, and your children will have even more so, is the accessibility of things. Because when here in the States, I don't know if you remember, when Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer came on at Christmas, that was a big event.
Huge. You would cancel meetings. You would make sure you were home. Absolutely, yeah.
And now you can watch Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer every day
Whenever
of the year. And my daughter is now used to DVR technology because we have a DVR. So you can pause live programming and you can rewind live programming. And it's very confusing to her if we go someplace or stay in a hotel that doesn't have that technology, and she doesn't understand why she just can't get something on demand, or why she can't. I'm in the mood to watch whatever show that she's watching. Let me go watch that because I will be able to find it. And when technology's not available to you anymore, it sort of shakes their worldview a little bit.
And it makes me wonder if future kids aren't going to appreciate Star Wars the way that people our age did. Because
which version of Star Wars? Because there's like 15 of them now?
70s and 80s,
Yeah.
because you couldn't just go back and watch it over. You know, and I think that's what started the conversations between so many people. Hey, that movie was great. What do you think this meant when that happened? And now, whenever a movie comes out, if someone likes it, they just kind of watch the movie over and over again. They don't really get into the whole culture of it maybe as much.
Right.
Because everything is so accessible and available. And I swear, I'm going to show them Star Wars once and throw it out because I want them to love it.
Oh, don't make the mistake that I did. Make sure that you are in control of that situation.
Oh, yeah. Well, oh, man, I feel so bad for you. Cause,
It hurt.
Yeah.
It really hurt.
You have our sympathy.
Wow.
Hey, I think we reached the part of the show where I'm going to start asking people for some recommendations. So it doesn't have to be recommendations for kids. It could be anything that you feel would be of interest to our listeners. I'm going to set the ball rolling. Very recently, we had the Eurovision Song Contest, which is a pretty big deal over here. It's kind of crazy and weird and out there. And about this time every year, I find the need to go and revisit my Father Ted box set. I don't know if you guys had Father Ted in the States.
We have heard of it.
But I have heard
it was
of it.
late night PBS stuff. We would get it occasionally.
Okay, so it's written by Graham Linehan, who's quite a well-known comedy writer over here. And it's these three Catholic priests living on a place called Craggy Island, which is off the coast of mainland Ireland, with their housekeeper. And they get into lots of crazy situations. And there's one particular episode where they end up, because of a feud between Father Ted and another priest on the island, they end up entering for Ireland's song for the Eurovision.
I love the setup for this. This is amazing.
Oh, my God, yeah. And obviously, they've never written a song before in their lives. So they decide they're going to write a song. How hard can it be? So they've got like this Bontempi organ and a pretty naff acoustic guitar. And they come up with a song called My Lovely Horse. And it's amazing. It's one of the funniest things I've seen. And I can just keep watching it forever and ever. So, yeah, as soon as Eurovision comes and goes, that's my cue to go and dig out that episode and watch it again, and then watch a whole bunch more. So I'm going to go to Ben first. What would you like to recommend for our listeners?
What am I really into right now? Honestly, cleaning.
Wow.
Cleaning, really, because we have a very small bedroom that we have designated as going to be the baby's room, and we live in a small house, and I've lived here for 10 years, and my good lady wife, she moved in whenever we got married about 3 years ago. So for 10 years, I've been putting stuff up and storing them in these little hidey hole things. And now that I'm having to clean out this room, I'm pulling out all this stuff, and it's like opening the seals on King Tut's tomb. And I want to recommend this to everybody. Start cleaning. Go through your attic. Go through your basement. You will find stuff that you have forgotten and has meant so much to you. I found my freaking Millennium Falcon spaceship in the back corner of something. It's sitting here on my desk now. I'm going to hang it up in pride of place. I forgot that I had it. How could you forget that you had that? So it's been Christmas all over, and I'm sure if people would just start cleaning, they'd find this stuff and make themselves happier. You would probably find your book, Deb, if you were to start rummaging.
I know where the book is. I know exactly.
She just doesn't want to read it.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
Actually, my
understandable.
16-year-old is really, really into the Star Trek novels, and it probably has.
What era?
all of them. He has read all of them.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, and either through the library or in his copious collection. And even, he picked it up and handed it back to me and said, "This is just wrong."
How does he deal with continuity issues? Because I know in Star Trek, the novels can be very, very heavy with that.
Again, he's okay with it. He can just skate along. And
Okay.
He's got a very nice, delineation. And my older son is offended that they're throwing the extended universe out with the new movies. He thinks that's wrong, and how dare they do that? There's all these very well developed characters and storylines and plots that have happened, and they can't just do that. I'm like, they can do whatever they want. It's alternate timelines. Come on, you've been around science fiction long enough.
Yeah, that's it. So, it's a parallel universe. So, Deb, do you have something you'd like to recommend?
Well,
for the
let's see.
listeners?
What am I really excited about? A couple things. The FA Cup was yesterday. That was very exciting. So
Yeah. Arsenal scraped
yeah,
through.
they did. That was a very exciting game. So now we're at the end of, sort of the end of football for a while. But
We still have the World
we
Cup.
do still have the World Cup, but that's later. But I'm excited about Paul Cornell's book coming out next week, Severed Streets.
Yes.
Because I love London Falling. I love that it had a football sort of mystery at the center of it, which I thought was really fun. I am once again into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I gave that up as bad business after about 4 episodes in because it was the dullest thing I had ever seen.
We had this exact same conversation on the last episode with
I was gonna
Ben's
say,
podcast mate, Dave.
Dave was talking about that.
Yeah, and I found after the first couple of episodes, I found it deathly dull.
It was like
but my wife persevered with it.
Superhero version. It was the worst crime procedural. So, we went to go see Captain America Winter Soldier, which I really, really enjoyed. And I started watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. with episode 17. I skipped all the slodgy middle and went with episode 17, which it comes right in after the events of the Winter Soldier. And it got really good again, to the point where I'm really excited for season 2. So if anybody has given up on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I would encourage them to come back and start with episode 17. You just forget the whole bit with all the, you can gloss over everything that happened. You'll pick it up quickly enough. And
yeah, there's a lot of people with the same opinion.
it just, they really picked up the pace. I hope they can keep it up, because anybody that can make a superhero story dull should just really be shot. I mean, how can you do that? How can you make it boring? It was, Agents of the Cubicles or something. I don't know. It was just really, really bad. But
and didn't they announce a new spin-off from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as well?
They did. Agent Carter, which I'm really excited about. So, Marvel is just doing everything right these days. Where DC is sort of faltering in sort of how they're presenting their catalog. I don't know. You have Fantastic Four, where you have multiracial siblings. You have Agent Carter coming in with a woman at the head of a superhero franchise. Like, hello, take my money. If you come up with a Black Widow movie, you will own my soul. You will own my soul. So yeah,
Let's make this happen.
Mark,
make it happen.
this is reminding me. Can I give a supplemental recommendation?
Sure, you can. Yeah.
There's a book out there called We Denistas. And
Oh yeah, I've heard of that one.
Now
Yeah.
you're making me blush.
Deb, you okay? I need to give some background to this. When the girl who would become my wife and I met, which was about 3.5 to 4 years ago, we were kind of doing that awkward thing where we're standing there talking. I think we were on a deck somewhere at somebody's house. We'd met through a mutual friend. We were kind of standing there, and we were kind of feeling out each other, seeing what everyone likes. And she told me that she was really into Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She was a huge fan of it, and I confessed to her that because for several reasons I had never actually seen it. It was always on my radar, but for whatever reason I used to play music a lot, and we were always practicing and playing. So I never seemed to be home whenever it was on. But I swear, this is the only time in my life I was ever smooth. I'm so proud of this, I was telling her that I was into a show called Doctor Who, and that the guy who brought it back, Russell T. Davies, he had said that whenever he was developing it, he was making the character format more in line with how Buffy the Vampire Slayer was, as opposed to the classic series. So I was telling her, and she had never seen Doctor Who. So I totally did the whole, well, hey, maybe we should start watching it. So what we did was we kept getting together, and we would watch one season of Buffy, and then we would watch one season of Doctor Who, then go back to Buffy, then Doctor Who. And next thing you know, we're married and we're expecting a kid in October. So last Christmas, I gave her Whedonistas in her stocking. She absolutely loves it. She went through it, thrilled, absolutely thrilled. So thank you, Deb. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's your child has superior genes already. I can tell.
Oh, get this! You mentioned that you collected all the Buffy figures. Our wedding cake topper was Buffy. Was the Buffy figure from Prophecy Girl and Christopher Eccleston, and because that was the first Doctor that she saw, and they both were wearing black leather jackets, and it was perfect, absolutely perfect.
That's very cool. Very cool.
That's very cool. Very cool. Right. Well, we've kind of reached the end now, but I do want to give a little plug to all my various guests. Lee, who's had to disappear to watch Godzilla. You can find him on the Blue Box podcast with myself and Simon and J.R. Southall. He also presents a radio show with Simon called The Phonic Screwdriver, which is a live radio show which you can listen into on the internet, or if you're local to Exeter, you can hear it on the FM frequency as well. So you can search that out through Google. Ben,
Yes.
You are part of a magnificent triumvirate of wackiness and hijinks that is known as the Tower of Technobabble.
Yes.
Would you like to give it a little plug?
Tower of Technobabble is like season 17 of Doctor Who, only without all the without all the Doctor Who references, I should point out. It's just a little pretend radio show we do on the internet. We have a good time. Basically, everything that we talked about today, we get into. It's a nerd fest. And,
Love Nerdfest.
You have a psychotic robot as well, though,
yes,
don't you?
we have a announcer who's a robot who doesn't really like us, and that's always fun. He's our most popular character.
I think it's more of a love-hate relationship.
He's our most popular. Well, yeah. Well, I have to plug him in every night, so he, relies on me, so he can't get too hateful. So what are you going to do? And yeah, thank you, Mark.
Excellent. So you can search that out on iTunes and also through toweroftechnobabble.com.
Yes.
And of course, we cannot finish the show without mentioning the Hugo Award nominated Verity podcast.
Oh, thank you. Blush. I'm blushing again. You guys are just making me blush. Yes, Verity
Deb,
Podcast at veritypodcast.com, where there's links to other places on the web that I will be. That's probably the easiest place to sort of track down all the social media stuff. But yeah, that's the, there's other things happening and other things that we're doing and I'm doing personally, but that's sort of like the big bright star in the sky right now. And taking a
It's a unique voice in the world of Doctor Who podcasts, in my opinion.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we do try. I think we bring something a little sassy to the table, but
Deb, I love your podcast. I love it.
Thank you so much.
In fact, people listening, internet, just turn your head for just a second. Deb, I used to wish that I was a girl so I could be on your podcast at least once. Oh my God, I love it.
Maybe one day, Ben.
And if I was
Once
a
you've
real
had the
man, I could be
operation.
on the Blue Box. Maybe. I don't know.
Hey, you've been on the Blue Box before.
But you weren't there.
Yeah. Well, they had to make way. They had to get rid of the deadwood to get the guests
No,
on.
never.
We're going to change the name of this show to We Love Deb Stanish.
Oh my gosh, you guys stop.
Deb, we live two
Thank
states
you guys
away,
so much.
and we need to get all of our kids together for a play date. So let's make that happen.
There you go.
Yeah, that should be easy to do.
Hey, in the States, what's a couple thousand miles? It's not bad.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Guys, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. It's been a great, fun episode, and we hope to have you back on the show again sometime soon.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun, Mark.
Love it.
Thanks.
So thanks to Ben, Deb and Lee. And before we go, an extra little treat for you. Momo Tempo have a new EP out today as we release this episode. And it's called Conspiracy. You'll be able to find it on iTunes and from other reputable sources. And it precedes the new album, which is due out this summer. If you're familiar with Momo's work, I think you'll be more than happy with the end result.
To 9:15, Lena writes a letter to an African queen. 10:10 and then at 11 or so, Fiona files a form with the FCO. 1:45 until 2:45, Danica makes a call to the DEC. Midday until 40 ticks past noon, Rachel mails the amnesty rep in Rangoon. 22:20 new address from Eve. Slowly I'm decoding that she's wanting to leave. Is that another reason why she's wanting to leave me? As the tape spools through, I hear you say softly, we've a mission to listen to all humanity. I know you wanna go, but more importantly, imagine all the fun you're gonna miss out without me. 12:45 until 1:45. Laura loads her lenses for Mogadishu. 8:30 a.m. till almost 10. Tanya has her last exam at CNN. 4:42, Sophie texts to say she's had her papers for Médecins Sans Frontières. 8:10, Jen is on a boat in Greece, explaining why she's now a diver with Greenpeace. You say you won't stay until the whole world's won, but I know there's gotta be something else going on. Imagine all the fun you're gonna miss out on. Imagine all the fun you're gonna miss out without me. Conspiracy. It's time to know the reason why she's wanting to leave me. Conspiracy. Imagine all the fun you're gonna miss out. Conspiracy. It's gotta be a reason why she's wanting to leave me. Conspiracy. Imagine all the fun you're gonna miss out without me. WHO. Midnight in Geneva, Gemma's line is poor as she gushes how the Arab Spring just needs her more. 10:45, I hear my Clara agree to Cairo correspondent for the BBC. In my files, I noticed Susan didn't check in at all. Only Facebook told me she's skydiving into Nepal. Say you won't stay until the whole world's won, but I know there's gotta be something else going on. Imagine all the fun you're gonna miss out on. Imagine all the fun you're gonna miss out without me. It's time to know the reason why she's wanting to leave me. Imagine all the fun you're gonna miss out, baby. Conspiracy. It's gotta be a reason why she's wanting to leave me. Conspiracy. Imagine all the fun you're gonna miss out without me. Off on the bus, and in her wheelie bin I find her diaries of us. There's gotta be a reason why